JP. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us. These just keep getting more and more awesome. This is incredible to be able to sit down with Chip. Thank you guys for being here. So YouPrint, Kevin and I formed YouPrint. We have a heart, just like Chip and just like this company, organizations like this, to transform a community, but specifically through like God-designed innovation. And the idea, one of the things we say at YouPrint is when you tap into God, you actually tap into your genius. And so knowing your purpose and courageously following is the greatest thing you can do. And that's what we do at YouPrint. I know that that's kind of the heart of those here today. And this gentleman needs no introduction. You all know Chip, but why he's here is because this is an example of God-designed purpose lived out. And so what an honor and just a privilege to be able to chat with you today, Chip.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, man. So I want to kick this off with a question for you. Do you see a kindred spirit, or would you agree that there's this kindred spirit between faith and innovation? And expound upon that a little bit.
So this will be boring to you because I mentioned this last night at the dinner. So you get a little bit older, you tell stories, right? I was thinking about my grandfather, and as he got older, he told stories and mostly told the same story again and again and again. And I seek not to do that. But I was driving in today and I saw this big sign, Brightmore, and I looked up at that guy on that sign like, damn, that guy looks younger than me, man. I mean, that's here's the way I would answer that question. So in 1981, I was 30 years old, and I made the decision that somehow, some way, I had to own something. You're either an employee or you're an owner. And like Lugnut Blevins here, we grew up in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. He was really in the middle of nowhere. Peggy and I grew up in Frankfort, Kentucky, which was the capital of Kentucky. Interest rates in the fall of 1980 were 21%. So this bank was way overcapitalized, and they were coining money. And because it was my hometown, because I played basketball, because I knew everybody in town and all the directors of the bank, I knew that the directors were basically trying to steal stock from fundamentally widows and orphans at 25 cents on the dollar. So the richest guy in Kentucky and I concocted a plan that we could borrow 3 times what they were offering to the shareholders and own the bank for free. So I was talking to a colleague on a Piedmont YS-11 flight about this strategy, and this guy leaned around sitting behind us and said, that's got to be the Farmers Bank. And I didn't know the guy at the time, and he was not the richest guy in Kentucky at the time, but he is today. The business school is named after him. So we got off the plane and we went to his house, and we stayed up all night. And somehow, some way, I contracted the pink eye, conjunctivitis. So my eye was shut, and I drove one-eyed all the way back to work. Got to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and now I'm going to try to answer your question now. So I came running home, so excited to sit down at the dinner table with Peggy and say, baby, we're gonna buy the Farmers Bank and Capital Trust Company, and we're gonna own it for free. And let me show you how that works. And she says, let's get out the legal pad. Let's put down the positives and the negatives. We had a 6-year-old, and Kate was 3 at the time. So she said, well, there are like 50 negatives and like 2 positives, because if this doesn't work, you're not gonna have a job. I gotta try it, because he'll take care of us.
Mm-hmm.
God will take care of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in to resign with my supervisor, and he made me go see his supervisor and his supervisor, and then went to see the CEO of the bank. This is a really big bank. And he said, you have a bright future. You could have my job someday. And that's the stupidest idea I've ever seen in my life. I said, I'm gonna try it. So I went back to my hometown. So think of the Murkison building. There was a building in downtown Frankfort, it was just like that. It was vacant, so I rented a room for next to nothing. So this is 1981, so there's no cell phones, there are no computers. There's one little light coming down from the ceiling, and I bought a Radio Shack answering machine. And we launched a public tender for all the shares in the bank. So the entire board of directors, and these were fathers of my friends, the guy that owned the newspaper, the guy that was the CEO of the water company, go down the list. Started writing articles in the newspaper that I was going to destroy the community. And I probably went door to door and called on at least 100 shareholders out of the 400. Did not get one share. So had to crawl on my belly all the way back from Frankfort, Kentucky to Winston-Salem, North Carolina to get my job back. And you might think that he closed the door. But the CEO of the largest bank in Kentucky that gave us a $53 million line of credit hired me to run a bank in Lexington, Kentucky. He said he was going to buy it. This is before the laws changed. He didn't buy it. I was on my own. The bank got in trouble. We bought it with some rich guys that we found in Kentucky. Sold it. The bank won, started our own company after that, and then the rest is kind of history. So it's just like, and you know, sometimes you get asked a question like, what keeps you up at night? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. If everything goes away tomorrow, it doesn't matter.
That's
Only
huge.
one thing matters, and that's what you're here to talk about.
Yeah. Well, that's just, it empowers me as a 30-something, you know, setting out on this. So that's super cool, Chip. And it's funny because it leads into that second, you know, the second thought here is, when we sat down in your office last week, you told me you're 67, you know, so that's where I am now. So I'm giving that away. I apologize. But I thought to myself, you know, what were you like at 20, 30? And you've alluded to that. But specifically, how has spirituality and your spiritual growth really helped that process along the way to turn around now and say, if it all goes away tomorrow, right? I mean, that's a pretty powerful testimony 37 years later. But what has your spiritual growth, how has that aided that?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that question is, and I think we chatted about this briefly in my office. So the day after Lee and I started work at the Wachovia Bank, we met a guy named John Chalk. And you guys ever listen to Timothy Keller? You know who Timothy Keller is, JP does. Timothy Keller has a church in New York City. I don't know how many people go there. I would imagine 10,000. But you should download his podcast. I try to listen to him every Sunday in addition to church. He is a modern day C.S. Lewis. The only other modern day C.S. Lewis that I knew was John Chalk. And we lost John when he was 53, so John would have been a couple of years older than I, so go back 15 years. But John had a way about him that was, he made you, when you were with him, want to talk about Christ. He was never, ever in your face. But what all that relates to me is balance. And, you know, some of us are just wired, right? And you just get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you go as hard as you can go, and you just love not every minute, every second. Right? And you can get off, right? And most of you have heard me say all this stuff before, but I just think if you can focus on your family, focus on and your wife, those are two different things. One of my mentors, this is kind of a horrible story, one of my real close friends and mentors at Wachovia was 10 years older than I. He graduated #1 in his class at Tulane, and went in the United States Navy, shot down twice in Vietnam. He had the most wonderful wife in the world, 3 young kids, 3 beautiful children now, obviously quite a bit older. And the day that they all went to Princeton, the day that his last daughter graduated from Princeton, his wife left him. Not once did he ever go anywhere with her. It was always the family, the family, the family. So I think you need to bifurcate that.
Yes.
And then you add business and health and faith on top of that, those 5 data points. If you can have balance with those, then I think you'll be a better person. But it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Absolutely, because there's constantly warring in all those different directions and
people are pulling at
tugging you. Sure.
Time is precious.
So when you talk about tragic events like that, one of the things that we kind of aspire to at YouPrint is that tragedies are not tragedies. They are simply a trajectory. God's trying to do something in this, right? For a good purpose.
He has a plan.
Absolutely. So in your own life, can you think of a specific tragedy, and you've already alluded to a couple, but is there one that jumps out to you that has, in hindsight, turned into a trajectory that, in fact, you saw God's hand in that completely?
Well, I mean, I think that had to be at 7 o'clock in the morning on September 5th, 1962.
That's a date.
Yeah, when my mother walked in and said, Dad's gone. What does that mean? She never was really specific, but my 9-year-old brother started crying. And then we walked downstairs. There were a bunch of people downstairs, including Hal Hickson. And Hal was a senior executive at American Airlines. And at the time, we lived in Buffalo, New York, right outside of Buffalo in Orchard Park. And he said, the plane went down last night and we lost your dad. And he looked me square in the eye and he said, and now you're the man of the house. You're 11, right? So I'll never forget his face. I'll never forget how he couched that. So things like that kind of begin to form you and your personality and who you are. If you ask my mother, before that, she would have said I was just a really sweet, quiet little kid. So that changed.
Right.
But again, and you sometimes think about that and say, like, what if we lived in New York the rest of our lives if that didn't happen and moved back to Kentucky and some of the things we talked about earlier. So it's his plan.
Yeah, that's powerful, super powerful. When we were in your office, I was talking to you. I thought about this. I mean, the facility here is unbelievable. The culture is second to none. It's just fantastic. It's beautiful. And being a Wilmington native, see that whole thing, grow. But there's one thought that we have kind of preparing for this is, what impresses you?
So when you ask that question, I think about what people impress me.
Okay.
I've already talked about John. Some of you all have heard some of these things before, but I think great listeners impress me. People that put others in front of themselves impress. Marathoners and not sprinters impress. I mean, even my dear friend David Luck. So, and I don't think, I hope he will not. Is he here? No. I hope he will not be offended by me saying this. But, I've known David for over 30 years, and we talk about tithing. And David and I were great friends when we were like ultra poor. So you start out making $750 a month pre-tax, and you work your way up from there. Tithing's 10%. Now we can have the debate, pre-tax or after-tax. So for the Luck family, triple it, his entire life. How about that? Can you do that? Will you do that? Will you have that conversation? I'll tell you this. every single time that Peggy and I have given money to those that can't help themselves. And I was reading the Bible this morning, and this thing that as a search engine, and I really wasn't very good. So, how many times does Jesus talk about helping the poor? In the New Testament, 408 times. And I just came from Glow. We just did our groundbreaking today at 10 o'clock for Glow. Ben David spoke. Do you know, and I hate this word, at risk, right? I just hate it. I really don't know what it means, but that's probably why I hate it, because I don't want to talk about it. But 60% of the at-risk females in Wilmington graduate from high school. 8% graduate from college. 8. At our sister school in New York City, Glow's sister school, funded by the Tisch Foundation, 100% graduate from high school, and 97% graduate from college. Education is the key to poverty. And Ben David said today, the number one thing beyond education is a mother reading to her babies to assure success. So if we can continue to do all those things and help that way, that's important.
Yeah. You know, Chip, this is the last question that I have, and then we'll kind of open it up for folks who want to ask questions. But being a Wilmington native, right? I mean, this is my heart and soul. This is where I was brought up and born and raised, and went away for a few years, you know, kind of caught my licks, right? And came back in '08, around about the same time that things here were getting moving. I see the impact that Live Oak Bank and this innovation that you've kind of brought with you here, that it's had. But I think a lot about legacy. I'm a dad to 4 kids. You know, I think about the city. I think about the life impact that we have. So when I think about legacy for you, and the question is when you think about your legacy, what would you hope that the people of Wilmington would remember when it comes to your legacy, your impact here?
Don't care. Don't care at all. It's not about me. It's about what these people create. Could care less.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. You know, it's good. The one of the things that we do at YouPrint is really highlight faith-driven innovators like yourself, because we believe that that's kind of God's genius, and that's how we transform the city. And we are actively in the process of doing that. You know, for our mission, our heart is to eradicate spiritual poverty, and we have a vision. We're going to be building this life center. We've talked about this in previous engagements, but it's a place where people can be healed physically and spiritually, but it's kind of like a hub for entrepreneurship and innovation, you know, to really awaken people to this idea. And the idea is to help people become, you know, that expression. And so that's really our heart, and we see that here. We want to facilitate that conversation. So Chip, it's just a privilege, man, to really hear from you and see how this is going on. So with that being said, I want to open the room up for questioning. You know, I know you guys have a ton of questions, and want to just, you know, y'all bring them as you will. So anybody has any questions?
No, yeah, he can communicate.
And I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of believing that how we were created and who we are is somehow a mistake because it doesn't look like somebody else. But the beauty of what we teach at YouPrint is there's one you. Your thumbprint is one in multiple billions, and that matters. It's there for a reason, right? And so today I've just been really empowered because, like, you're fully you, man. And that's awesome. And the best way to honor him is to be that you and not give in to the opinions of people who say you need to look a certain way.
Right.
And so seeing the dynamic difference between Jimmy and yourself and me and everybody else here, that's a powerful, powerful thing, right? And so, you know, what we have a heart to do is help people uncover what that really is. Because so often we grow up with this junk on us. I got to look this way. It has to look this way. And that's kind of foolishness. We've got to go and say, I am going this way. That's leadership. That's courage, right? And that's what it takes to make an impact. And so we set some cards out for you guys, just so you can have them. I just want to make sure you guys grab them to let you know about who we are, what we do. Our portable faith community, it wakes you up each day with some encouragement. It's part of our mission on how we're trying to move and transform the city. Just want to make sure you guys get them. If you didn't get a card, I'll be up front. But Chip, man, this has just been a privilege. I mean, really, really awesome, my friend. So thank you guys.